Every encounter we have with another human being is, in truth, an encounter with ourselves. The world functions as a vast psychological mirror, endlessly reflecting back to us what lives within. When we look at someone and feel admiration, envy, or resentment, we are not merely responding to them. We are meeting aspects of our own inner world. The qualities that disturb us in others are often the ones we've disowned in ourselves. This is the essence of the mirror principle. What we condemn or glorify outside is a reflection of what lies unresolved inside. In the quiet corners of the psyche dwell countless fragments of the self, memories, impulses, and emotions we have cast away because they didn't fit the image we wish to uphold. From childhood, we were taught what was acceptable and what was not. We learned which emotions would earn us love and which would bring rejection. Anger, jealousy, and pride were sent into hiding, buried beneath layers of social conditioning. But the psyche never forgets what it has exiled. Those rejected pieces continue to live beneath consciousness, waiting to be recognized again. When we meet someone who embodies the traits we've repressed, the unconscious seizes the opportunity to make itself known. It projects those hidden contents outward, and suddenly we find ourselves irritated, judgmental, or strangely fascinated by another person. We might call them arrogant, selfish, or overly emotional, not realizing that these are qualities we have simply refused to claim as our own. The intensity of our reaction is the clue. It reveals the presence of projection. We do not react strongly to what does not belong to us in some way. The mirror does not lie. It simply shows us what we are unwilling to see. The mirror principle is not meant to accuse but to awaken. It invites us to approach conflict with curiosity rather than defense. When we feel hatred or disdain towards someone, we can ask, what is this showing me about myself? Such a question transforms judgment into self-awareness. Instead of blaming the outer world, we begin to retrieve the inner one. Every irritation becomes a breadcrumb leading us back to a lost part of our soul. The one who triggers us is not our enemy, but our teacher, carrying a reflection we need to face. This understanding dissolves the illusion of separation. We begin to see that the world is not happening to us. It is happening for us as a mirror of our own evolution. The person we can't stand may be reflecting our own hidden insecurity. The one we idolize may mirror our unclaimed greatness. When we realize that every reaction is an opportunity for integration, life itself becomes therapy. The outer world becomes a map of the inner terrain. There is deep humility in recognizing the mirror. It strips us of the comfort of blame. We can no longer say, they are the problem, without acknowledging that the problem also lies within us. This realization is uncomfortable, even painful, because it confronts the ego's need to appear flawless. Yet it is precisely in that discomfort that transformation begins. The shadow, once seen, loses its power to manipulate from behind the scenes. What was once projected outward becomes owned inwardly, and ownership brings freedom. Many relationships falter because both individuals mistake projection for reality. They fight the image they see in the other, not realizing that they are wrestling with their own reflection. The partner who accuses the other of control may be suppressing their own desire for dominance. The friend who complains about arrogance may be denying their own ambition. The co-worker who irritates us with their laziness might mirror our own exhaustion and avoidance. Each moment of tension holds the potential for insight. If we have the courage to look deeper. But the mirror doesn't only reflect our darkness, it reveals our light as well. The people we admire often embody qualities we have not yet accepted within ourselves. When we say, "I could never be like them," it is often our soul whispering, "Yes, you could." Admiration is the shadow of potential. To own our admiration is to allow ourselves to grow into what we already see. The mirror teaches that we are not separate from what we love or what we hate. Both are expressions of what we are capable of becoming. To live with awareness of the mirror principle is to walk through life with radical honesty. It means noticing when judgment arises and turning the gaze inward before casting blame outward. It means understanding that our perception of the world is colored by the lens of our own unresolved emotions. The person who appears cruel might be reflecting our own suppressed anger. The one who seems distant might echo our own fear of intimacy. Each reflection carries information about what is unhealed within us. In the end, the mirror principle invites us to reclaim power from projection. Instead of waiting for others to change, we change the way we see. Instead of defending against reflection, we study it. Every human interaction becomes a dialogue between consciousness and the unconscious. What disturbs us most in others is often the place where our own healing begins. The mirror is merciless, but it is also merciful. It shows us the truth so that we may become whole once more. Deep within the human psyche exists a vast chamber where everything unaccepted, unwanted, and unacknowledged is stored. This hidden realm, known as the repressed self, is composed of all the emotions, desires, and instincts that consciousness has exiled in order to maintain a sense of moral, social, or personal order. From an early age, we are taught which parts of ourselves are good and which are bad. We learn to smile instead of rage, to be polite instead of honest, to obey instead of question. What cannot be expressed safely is pushed beneath awareness, buried in the dark soil of the unconscious. Yet what is repressed never disappears. It simply finds new ways to surface. The repressed self begins forming the moment we experience disapproval. A child who expresses anger may be told that anger is unacceptable. A child who cries may be told to toughen up. A child who dreams too wildly may be told to be realistic. Each of these corrections teaches the child that certain emotions or impulses threaten love and belonging. To survive, the psyche creates a mask, a version of the self that is acceptable to others. This mask becomes the conscious identity, while the rejected emotions and instincts are locked away in the unconscious. Over time, the repressed self becomes a shadow world of everything we've learned to hide. But repression does not erase energy, it only disguises it. The emotions and instincts we refuse to acknowledge continue to live within us, influencing our choices, relationships, and perceptions from below the surface. The person who represses anger may become overly accommodating, seeking harmony at any cost, yet secretly seething inside. The one who represses desire may appear pure or detached, but is haunted by unspoken cravings. The one who represses fear may project an image of confidence while trembling internally. The repressed self does not die. It acts out through symptoms, projections, and compulsions. It is the unseen author behind much of our suffering. Repression is often mistaken for self-control, but it is not the same. Self-control is conscious discipline. Repression is unconscious denial. One is rooted in awareness, the other in fear. The person who represses emotions believes that by ignoring them, they have mastered them, but the opposite is true. What is repressed controls us precisely because it operates without our awareness. Like a ghost locked in the basement, the repressed self finds ways to haunt the upper floors of our lives, whispering through anxiety, nightmares, irritability, and the patterns we cannot seem to break. The tragedy of repression is that it not only buries pain, but also power. Within the repressed self lies immense creative potential, raw emotional vitality, and untamed authenticity. Every emotion we silence contains energy. Anger contains assertiveness. Fear contains sensitivity. Envy contains desire for growth. And sadness contains depth of feeling. When we repress these forces, we drain ourselves of vitality. We become fragmented beings, half alive, half hidden, living in constant tension between who we are and who we pretend to be. The repressed self also shapes how we perceive others, because the psyche cannot tolerate acknowledging certain traits in itself. It projects them onto the world. The person who has repressed their aggression might see others as domineering. The one who has repressed sexuality may judge others as immoral. The one who represses ambition may accuse others of greed. Through projection, the repressed self disguises its presence, allowing the conscious mind to remain innocent while secretly expressing the very impulses it denies. This is why we are often most irritated by the qualities we secretly possess. The people who trigger us become mirrors, reflecting what we have hidden away. Repression, however, is not a failure. It is a defense mechanism born of survival. It once protected us from experiences we were too young or fragile to process. But what once saved us eventually limits us. As adults, we must retrieve what was once buried, bringing awareness to the lost fragments of self. This process is not easy. It requires courage to face the emotions we were taught to fear. The repressed self resists exposure because it equates visibility with danger. To acknowledge anger may feel like betrayal. To feel desire may feel like sin. To show vulnerability may feel like weakness. Yet these feelings are not wrong. They are human. To approach the repressed self, we must become gentle observers of our inner reactions. The moments when we overreact, feel disproportionate anger, or withdraw from intimacy are clues that something buried is stirring. Dreams often reveal the language of repression, presenting us with symbols of what we have refused to see. The body too carries the burden of what the mind denies. Tight muscles, shallow breath, fatigue, and chronic tension are all expressions of suppressed emotion. The repressed self speaks through every system that can still move and feel. Bringing light to repression does not mean indulging every impulse or emotion, but rather understanding it. When we give the repressed self a voice, we restore balance to the psyche. What was once chaotic becomes conscious, and consciousness transforms energy. The one who embraces their anger becomes assertive. The one who embraces their fear becomes wise. The one who embraces their envy becomes motivated. The repressed self, once seen, ceases to sabotage from the shadows and instead contributes to wholeness. The journey towards self-acceptance begins with recognizing that there are no bad emotions, only emotions that have been misunderstood. Every feeling carries intelligence, every instinct has purpose. The parts we repress are not our enemies, they are the exiled members of our inner family waiting to return. To deny them is to remain divided, but to acknowledge them is to reclaim the fullness of who we are. When the human mind encounters something within itself that feels unbearable, something too shameful, frightening or painful to face, it does not destroy it, it displaces it. This mechanism is known as projection. The psyche, in an act of self-preservation, attributes its own disowned qualities, motives, or emotions to others. Instead of saying, "I am angry," one insists, "They are angry with me." Instead of acknowledging jealousy, one perceives another as envious. Projection is the mind's way of keeping the self-image intact while still allowing forbidden material to express itself. It is not an act of malice, but of defense, a psychological mirror that turns inward realities outward to protect the fragile balance of the ego. Projection begins in the earliest layers of consciousness. As children, we quickly learn which emotions are acceptable and which invite rejection or punishment. We internalize rules about goodness, politeness, strength, and morality, creating an idealized image of who we believe we must be. Yet no one can live entirely according to this ideal. There are always thoughts and feelings that contradict it: envy, pride, resentment, lust, aggression. Because the ego cannot reconcile these with its idea of goodness, it pushes them away into the unconscious. But what is buried there still demands recognition, and so the psyche projects these rejected qualities onto the outer world. The unacceptable becomes out there, safely distanced from the conscious self. Through projection, the inner world becomes painted onto the outer world. The individual who represses their selfishness may perceive others as manipulative or greedy. The one who denies their vulnerability might accuse others of weakness. The one who secretly desires control may claim that everyone else is domineering. Each accusation is not a lie, but a displacement, a psychological confession disguised as a criticism. The world becomes a stage upon which our denied selves perform. We believe we are describing others, when in truth we are revealing ourselves. Projection serves a powerful defensive purpose. It allows the mind to avoid unbearable self-awareness. To acknowledge one's own envy, cruelty, or weakness would threaten the ego's sense of worth and goodness. The psyche, therefore, externalizes these feelings, maintaining inner stability by locating the darkness elsewhere. This is why projection often carries such emotional intensity. When we accuse another of something, our reaction is charged because we are unconsciously defending against seeing that same quality in ourselves. The stronger the projection, the deeper the denial beneath it. This mechanism operates not only in individuals, but in groups, communities, and entire societies. Prejudice, scapegoating, and moral crusades often arise from collective projection. A group disowns its own violence, greed, or corruption by attributing it to another group, thus preserving the illusion of purity. History is filled with examples of civilizations that condemned others for sins they secretly practiced themselves. Projection, when multiplied across a culture, becomes ideology. It disguises inner darkness as righteous judgment. In personal relationships, projection is one of the most destructive yet revealing forces. Partners often mirror each other's unconscious material. The qualities we most criticize in the ones we love are frequently the ones we repress within ourselves. A person who accuses their partner of emotional coldness may be afraid of their own sensitivity. The one who complains of being controlled may be suppressing their own controlling impulses. The intensity of romantic attraction and conflict alike stems from this psychological exchange, each person unknowingly carrying the other's hidden contents. Relationships, therefore, become mirrors through which the unconscious seeks recognition. To recognize projection requires humility. It demands that we pause when judgment arises and ask, what part of me might this reflect? This question is disarming because it dismantles the defensive wall that projection builds. It redirects attention inward, where the true source of emotion resides. Yet most people resist this inquiry because it threatens the comfort of moral superiority. It is far easier to see fault in another than to admit one's own shadow. The ego thrives on contrast. It feels virtuous only by comparison. Projection preserves this illusion, allowing us to remain innocent while labeling others as guilty. However, projection is not entirely negative. It is also a means of communication between the conscious and unconscious. The psyche uses projection to bring attention to what has been forgotten or denied. The emotions that arise in reaction to others are signals pointing toward our unhealed places. Every irritation, resentment, or fascination carries information about the self. The one who angers us may represent a part we fear. The one who inspires us may reflect a potential we have not yet claimed. When we withdraw our projections, we reclaim this lost energy and move toward psychological wholeness. The process of withdrawing projection is gradual and requires awareness. It begins with noticing patterns, recurring judgments, emotional triggers, or themes in the people we attract. When we see repetition, we are seeing the unconscious attempting to make itself known. Through honest reflection, we begin to separate the outer person from the inner content we have placed upon them. Instead of reacting defensively, we can ask, why does this bother me so deeply? What does it awaken within me? This introspective stance transforms projection from a defense into a doorway for insight. Projection as defense will always be part of human psychology, for no one is fully conscious of themselves. The goal is not to eliminate it, but to recognize it when it occurs. Awareness softens projection's grip. The moment we admit, this might be mine, the wall between self and other begins to dissolve. What was once an accusation becomes a revelation. Through this awareness, the qualities we have cast out can be reintegrated, allowing us to see others with greater clarity and ourselves with greater honesty. Every human being carries within them a multitude of selves, some known, others hidden. The conscious self moves through the world, shaped by identity, morality, and memory, while beneath it lies the shadow, the repository of all that has been denied, repressed, or rejected. To integrate these opposites, to bring the light and dark into harmony, is the essential work of inner transformation. Yet this process is not easily embraced. Most people fear integration because it demands the death of who they think they are. The ego, built on stability and control, trembles at the thought of meeting the unknown within. The fear of integration is, at its core, the fear of losing oneself in the truth of what has been buried. This fear begins in childhood when the psyche learns to divide. The child's natural instincts, anger, curiosity, desire, creativity, are quickly met with approval or punishment. Approval becomes survival, so the psyche splits itself to keep love intact. The acceptable traits are carried into the light, while the forbidden ones are banished to the dark. Over time, these buried qualities form a separate identity, an unconscious twin who grows in silence. The conscious self builds its sense of goodness and worth upon this division. To integrate would mean to question that foundation, to face the forbidden emotions once buried, to stay safe. Thus, the adult clings to separation, mistaking fragmentation for order. integration threatens the ego's most cherished illusion. That it is in control, the conscious mind wants to believe it governs the whole being, but the unconscious reveals otherwise. When repressed impulses or emotions begin to surface, they challenge the ego's authority. The individual may experience anxiety, confusion, or even moral crisis because what arises contradicts their ideal self-image. The one who has always seen themselves as kind might discover buried rage. The one who has lived through discipline and restraint might uncover suppressed desire. The one who has built a life around certainty might confront chaos within. Such revelations feel destabilizing because they expose the fragile boundaries of identity. The fear of integration is also a fear of judgment. Many resist their own darkness because they confuse awareness with approval. To admit to envy aggression or pride feels like confessing sin. The moral mind, conditioned by social and cultural ideals, recoils from what it has labeled unworthy. Yet what is buried is not evil, it is human. Integration does not mean acting out every impulse, it means acknowledging its existence without shame. Still, the ego fears this act of seeing because it believes that to accept the shadow is to become it. The unconscious, however, does not seek domination. It seeks recognition. What remains unintegrated demands attention precisely because it wants to be known. There is also a deeper, more primal fear beneath integration, the fear of transformation itself. True inner growth always feels like a kind of death. To integrate is to let go of the false certainty of who we've been. It requires surrendering the comfort of polarity, good versus bad, right versus wrong, light versus dark. The psyche resists this surrender because it has spent a lifetime maintaining these divisions. The mind fears what will happen if those walls dissolve. Who will I be without my story? What will remain if my masks fall away? This existential dread keeps many imprisoned within the familiar patterns of denial, even when those patterns cause suffering. It feels safer to remain broken than to risk becoming whole. Integration asks for vulnerability, patience, and honesty. It is not a single revelation, but a continual dialogue between the conscious and unconscious. The fear arises each time something new emerges from the depths. A buried memory, an unacknowledged desire, a forgotten pain, all feel foreign at first. The ego reacts with resistance, seeking to push the material back into darkness. But the more it resists, the stronger the shadow becomes. The unintegrated self will always find expression through projection, self-sabotage, or emotional turmoil. Only by turning toward the fear itself does the process begin to soften. Many people mistake repression for virtue because integration appears dangerous. They believe that if they were to face their shadow, they would be overwhelmed by it. But the opposite is true. What is faced consciously loses its power to control. The danger lies not in integration, but in avoidance. The unacknowledged shadow manipulates from behind the scenes, shaping thoughts, relationships, and decisions without awareness. The fear of integration keeps humanity trapped in cycles of projection, condemning in others what it refuses to see within itself. To confront this fear, one must cultivate a different kind of courage, the courage of self-confrontation. It is not the courage of conquest, but of surrender, the willingness to descend into one's own depths and listen to what has been silenced. This journey cannot be forced or rushed. It unfolds through awareness, compassion, and humility. The fear of integration diminishes not through suppression, but through understanding. Every emotion, no matter how dark, has something to teach. Every impulse, no matter how uncomfortable, reveals an unmet need or unlived truth. Integration does not destroy identity, it expands it. The self that emerges afterward is not fragmented but whole, capable of holding both tenderness and power, both reason and instinct. Yet the path toward that wholeness will always feel threatening to the part of us that equates safety with sameness. The fear of integration is the ego's final defense against evolution, the trembling before illumination, the last shadow before light. The path to wholeness is not a straight line, but a spiral. An inward descent before an upward ascent. It is the slow unraveling of everything false, everything borrowed, everything that has kept us divided from ourselves. To become whole is not to become perfect, but to become real, to gather the lost fragments of the self and hold them in conscious unity. The world often celebrates improvement, being better, stronger, more successful. But wholeness is not about becoming more. It is about reclaiming what was abandoned. It is the art of remembering who you were before fear began to shape your choices, before approval became the measure of your worth. Wholeness begins with awareness. To awaken is to realize that we live most of our lives as strangers to ourselves. We wear identities that protect us, stories that justify us, and beliefs that define us. Yet beneath all these constructions lies a quiet knowing, a truth untouched by conditioning. The path to wholeness invites us to meet that deeper self, the one who observes the noise without becoming it. Awareness is the first act of healing because it restores connection between the conscious mind and the unconscious world. When we turn inward with honesty, the forgotten emotions, unmet needs, and silent wounds begin to surface. These are not signs of weakness, but signals that the psyche is ready to integrate what was once rejected. To walk the path to wholeness is to meet the shadow with compassion. The shadow is not the enemy, it is the repository of everything we have denied. It contains our anger, fear, envy, and shame, but also our creativity, intuition, and power. Wholeness cannot be achieved by choosing only the light. It requires embracing the dark as part of our total being. The more we resist the shadow, the stronger it grows. The more we face it, the softer it becomes. When we acknowledge what we once condemned in ourselves, judgment turns into understanding. Integration is born not through force, but through acceptance. Healing unfolds when we begin to listen rather than suppress. Every emotion carries a message. Every pain points toward an unmet truth. Anger may reveal boundaries that were crossed. Sadness may speak of love that was lost. Fear may warn of vulnerability unacknowledged. The path to wholeness is the practice of decoding these messages rather than silencing them. When we learn to feel without fleeing, we reclaim our emotional intelligence, the body's ancient language of wisdom. The feelings we once labeled as negative become guides toward balance. They are not obstacles to enlightenment, but the doorway to it. Wholeness also asks us to question the masks we wear, the persona, the version of ourselves designed to be accepted by others, serves a necessary role in society, but it is not the entirety of who we are. When we over-identify with this image, we lose touch with the deeper soul beneath. The path to wholeness involves peeling away these layers of performance. It asks us to risk authenticity even when it invites rejection. True wholeness does not require universal approval. It requires self-alignment. The one who is whole can stand in solitude without loneliness, for they have befriended every part of their own being. Another dimension of wholeness is reconciliation with the past. Many lie haunted by earlier versions of themselves, mistakes, regrets, and unhealed wounds that shape their present choices. To move toward wholeness is to turn toward those inner exiles with tenderness. The child who felt unseen, the adolescent who felt unworthy, the adult who felt broken. All are waiting for recognition. When we offer compassion to these forgotten selves, we retrieve energy once locked in shame. Forgiveness, in this sense, is not an act of moral superiority, but of integration. It is saying to the self, you did what you could with what you knew, and allowing that truth to bring release. The path also demands patience. Wholeness cannot be achieved through intellectual understanding alone. It is a process that unfolds in layers, often through cycles of pain and revelation. Each time we encounter conflict or suffering, life is offering us another opportunity to reclaim a piece of ourselves. The people who trigger us, the patterns that repeat, the emotions that return, all are messengers of the unconscious asking for recognition. Growth occurs not when we escape these experiences, but when we meet them consciously, using them as mirrors to reveal what still needs healing. As awareness deepens, duality begins to dissolve. We realize that light and darkness, joy and sorrow, strength and vulnerability are not opposites, but partners in the dance of existence. The one who is whole no longer seeks to escape pain or cling to pleasure, but allows both to pass through like waves. To be whole is to live in harmony with the full range of human experience, knowing that nothing needs to be excluded for life to be complete. The path to wholeness is both solitary and universal. Each person must walk their own terrain of memory, fear, and desire, yet the essence of this journey is shared by all. It is the pilgrimage of returning to oneself after a long exile in illusion. It asks for courage to confront what has been hidden, humility to accept imperfection, and faith in the possibility of inner coherence. The destination is not a state of purity, but of presence, a deep embodied awareness that every fragment of the soul belongs